The galaxy was quiet. Too quiet. For 300 years, nobody had heard from humans. They had simply vanished one day, leaving behind empty colonies and silent space stations. Most aliens thought good riddance. Humans were troublemakers anyway. The Galactic Council ruled everything now. 7 powerful alien races had divided up the galaxy like pieces of a pie. At the top sat the Vorthak, purple-skinned beings who could read minds and crush thoughts with a glance. Below them were the Nexari, crystal creatures whose bodies sparkled like diamonds and whose brains worked faster than supercomputers. Then came the others, the Draknari, with their dragon-like scales that changed color with their moods. The Ethereals, who floated around like glowing ghosts. Each species had their place in the pecking order, and nobody dared question it. Humans, they were at the very bottom. Even now, 3 centuries later, alien children learned about them in history class. As a warning, the violent mammals who couldn't evolve beyond their primitive nature, teachers would say. They fought with metal projectiles and crude explosives. They had no psychic powers, no advanced technology, and worst of all, they refused to know their place. Commander Zeltar was one of those teachers. His purple Vorthak skin rippled with amusement as he showed his students old human artifacts in the museum. Rusty weapons, broken communication devices, pictures of humans in their bulky spacesuits. "Look at these pathetic creatures," he told his class. They couldn't even travel faster than light without using massive relay stations. And their ships, made of metal and plastic like toys. No wonder they ran away when we offered to civilize them. The young Vorthak students giggled telepathically. One raised her hand. "Teacher, where did they go?" Zeltar shrugged his 4 shoulders. "Into the void between galaxies, probably. Space is vast and cold and empty out there. Nothing can survive long in that darkness. They've been dead for centuries." This was the story everyone believed. The galaxy had moved on without humans, and it was better for it. Trade flowed smoothly along established routes. Wars were rare because the Council kept everyone in line. Rebellious species were quickly reminded of their place through displays of psychic force or advanced weaponry. Peace through order. That was the Council's motto. But lately, some strange things had been happening. Deep space sensors picked up odd readings from the galactic rim. Ships reported seeing lights where no stars existed. A few traders claimed their instruments detected massive energy signatures moving through empty space. But when they investigated, they found nothing. The Council dismissed these reports as equipment malfunctions or pilot hallucinations. After all, what could possibly be out there in the cold void where humans had fled so long ago? Commander Zeltar finished his lesson and dismissed his students. As they filed out, chattering about their weekend plans, he looked once more at the human exhibits. Something about those old pictures bothered him. The humans didn't look afraid or defeated. Their eyes held something else, something that looked almost like determination. He shook his head and turned off the lights. Humans were history. The galaxy belonged to its rightful rulers now. If only he knew how wrong he was. The alarm hadn't sounded in Station Commander. Theknal's lifetime. His 4 crystalline arms moved frantically across the control panels as red warning lights bathed the monitoring station in panic. "This can't be right," he muttered, his diamond-like face flickering with confusion. Deep. Space Station Kepler-7 was supposed to be the most boring assignment in the galaxy. Nothing ever happened out here on the rim where space met the endless void. But something was happening now. His sensors showed a massive object approaching from the darkness between galaxies. It was huge, bigger than anything in the Council fleet. Records. But that wasn't the strangest part. The strangest part was how it moved. The object seemed to bend space around itself, making it impossible to get a clear reading. One moment it appeared to be light years away, the next it was practically on top of them. It didn't follow any known laws of physics. "Run a full spectrum analysis," Theknal ordered his assistant, a nervous young Nexari named Kivtal. The results made no sense. The ship's hull registered as being made from materials that shouldn't exist. Its energy signature was off the charts but completely stable. Most confusing of all, it was broadcasting something on very old, very familiar frequencies. "Sir," Kivtal's voice cracked with disbelief, "you need to see this. The transmission codes were ancient, stored in databases that hadn't been accessed in centuries. Human identification protocols, ship registry numbers from Earth's early space program. But that was impossible. Humans had been gone for 300 years. Vecnal activated the emergency communication array and sent word to Council headquarters. Within minutes, his quiet little monitoring station became the center of the galaxy's attention. High-ranking officials demanded updates every few seconds, but the mysterious ship wasn't waiting for bureaucracy. It simply appeared. One moment, Kepler-7's long-range sensors showed it approaching the outer defense grid. The next moment, it was sitting calmly in orbit around the Council's primary world, as if the journey across dozens of star systems had taken no time at all. The defense grids hadn't fired a single shot. They couldn't. Every time the automated systems tried to lock onto the intruder, the targeting computers reported the same message. No hostile intent detected. Weapons offline. Fleet Admiral Korvac was beside himself with rage. His scales flashed angry red as he screamed at his weapons officers. How can you not target it? It's right there. But the ship remained untouchable, sitting peacefully in high orbit like it belonged there. Then the transmission came. It arrived on every communication channel simultaneously. Council chambers, military frequencies, even personal devices picked up the signal. The voice was calm, clear, and spoke in perfect galactic standard. This is Captain Kim Ji-woo of the Human Exploration Corps. We have returned to honor our agreement with the Galactic Council. We request an immediate audience to discuss the future of our species and yours. The message repeated in dozens of languages, each pronunciation flawless. Panic spread through the council chambers like wildfire. Emergency sessions were called. Military commanders demanded permission to attack, but their weapons simply wouldn't function against the human vessel. 300 years of assumed superiority crumbled in a single moment. Humans were back, and they were nothing like the primitive creatures the galaxy remembered. The council chambers buzzed with nervous energy. Representatives from all 7 ruling species had gathered for the first time in decades. The massive hall, built to intimidate visitors with its towering walls and sharp angles, felt strangely small today. Captain Kim Ji-woo walked through the main entrance like she owned the place. She wasn't tall or imposing. In fact, she looked surprisingly ordinary for someone who had just terrified the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Her simple black uniform seemed to shimmer slightly, as if it was made from captured starlight. The guards flanking the entrance raised their weapons, then stopped in confusion. Their targeting systems kept displaying the same message: unable to acquire hostile target. Their guns simply refused to point at her. Honored representatives, Ji-woo said, her voice carrying clearly to every corner of the vast chamber without any amplification. Somehow, each alien heard her words in their own native language, perfectly translated. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. Prime Counselor Vextar, a massive Draknari whose scales were flashing angry crimson, slammed his clawed fist on his speaking platform. We agreed to nothing. You invaded our space and forced this meeting. Ji-woo smiled peacefully. We requested. There's a difference. You were exiled 3 centuries ago for good reason, Vextar continued, his voice echoing like thunder. Your species was violent, primitive, and refused to accept proper galactic order. What makes you think anything has changed? Instead of answering with words, Ji-woo simply raised her hand. The chamber's lights dimmed, then began to dance. They flowed like liquid mercury, reshaping themselves into a 3-dimensional map of the entire galaxy. Stars twinkled in miniature, complete with their planetary systems and trade routes. The detail was perfect, showing real-time positions of ships, space stations, even individual asteroids. Every alien in the chamber gasped. This level of real-time galactic mapping was impossible. The processing power alone would require computers, the size of planets. This is humanity's current understanding of local space, Ji-woo explained casually, as if she hadn't just performed a miracle. With a gesture, she highlighted dozens of star systems in soft blue light. Our original territory before we chose to leave. Commander Zeltar, the Vorthak who had been teaching about primitive humans just days earlier, leaned forward in disbelief. His mind-reading abilities, which could penetrate almost any alien consciousness, found nothing when he tried to scan the human captain. It was like she didn't exist on any psychic level. "Impossible," he whispered. Jiwoo heard him despite the say, "Distance and noise. Many things seem impossible until you understand the principles behind them. Would you like another demonstration?" Without waiting for an answer, she gestured toward the chamber's stone walls. The ancient rock began to flow like water, transforming into crystalline surfaces that reflected perfect images of distant worlds. Then the crystals sprouted into flowering vines that filled the air with impossible fragrances from 100 different planets. The assembled aliens watched in stunned silence as their meeting hall became a garden paradise. Then, with another casual wave, everything returned to normal stone and metal. "We didn't flee the galaxy," Jiwoo said into the absolute quiet. "We left to learn what we needed to become worthy partners rather than conquered subjects. We found teachers in the void who showed us that the universe operates on far deeper principles than force or dominion." Her dark eyes swept across the chamber, meeting the gaze of every representative. "We have returned to fulfill our promise. The question now is whether you're ready to evolve beyond the primitive concepts of ruler and ruled." The demonstration had lasted 3 hours. Captain Kim Jiwoo had shown them wonders that broke every law of physics the Council knew. She had made matter dance, bent light into impossible shapes, and somehow connected their chamber to distant worlds in real time. The alien representatives sat in stunned silence, their earlier arrogance replaced by confusion and fear. Now Jiwoo stood calmly at the center of the chamber, her hands clasped behind her back like a teacher addressing students. The casual way she had performed miracles made it even more unsettling. She wasn't showing off. This was just Tuesday for her. "We have 3 simple requests," she began, her voice carrying the same gentle tone she might use to order coffee. "First, complete autonomy for all human settlements and any world that chooses to join our alliance. No interference, no taxation, no council oversight." Prime Councillor Vextar's scales shifted from red to deep purple, a sign of barely controlled rage. "You expect us to simply hand over territory that has been under council jurisdiction for centuries?" "We're not asking you to hand over anything," Jiwoo replied patiently. "We're asking you to respect the choices of the beings who live there. If they want to remain under council rule, that's their decision. But if they choose freedom, you'll honor that choice." The Nexari trade representative, Kexmar, spoke up with his crystalline voice chiming like broken glass. "And your second demand? The immediate dismantling of your caste system." Jiwoo's tone remained pleasant, but something shifted in the air around her. "No more genetic hierarchy. No more species ranked by psychic ability or technological advancement. Every intelligent being gets equal representation and equal rights." The chamber erupted in outraged voices. The Vorthak mind readers had built their entire society around their mental superiority. The ethereals considered themselves naturally above physical beings. Even the lesser council species had someone to look down on. Commander Zeltar rose from his seat, his purple skin darkening with emotion. "The natural order exists for good reason. Some species are simply more evolved than others. You cannot expect us to treat primitive mining species as equals to advanced psionics." Jiwoo turned to face him directly. "Commander, what makes you think any species is more evolved than another? Your psychic abilities, your technology?" She gestured. And suddenly every alien in the chamber could feel what the enslaved mining species felt. The exhaustion, the hopelessness, the crushing weight of being considered less than others. The empathy hit them like a physical blow. Several representatives staggered under the weight of emotions they had never bothered to consider. Evolution isn't about power, Jiwoo continued as the forced empathy faded. It's about growth, understanding, compassion. By those measures, some of your primitive species are far more advanced than their so-called superiors. Prime Councillor Vextar forced himself to speak through gritted teeth. "And your third demand? Reparations." The word hung in the air like a challenge. 300 years ago, you forced humanity to abandon thriving worlds, billions of humans. Lost their homes because you decided we didn't deserve them. We want those worlds restored to their original condition, and we want technological assistance provided to every underdeveloped system that was exploited during our absence." The silence stretched for long minutes before Vextar began to laugh. It was a harsh, grinding sound that echoed off the chamber walls. "You return after 3 centuries with a single ship and make these ridiculous demands. Our combined fleets number in the millions. Our psychic warriors can shatter minds across star systems. What could possibly make you think we would agree to any of this?" Jiwoo's smile never wavered. "Because refusing means you haven't learned anything from the last." 3 hours. Fleet Admiral Korvac had never commanded such a massive armada. 5,000 ships stretched across space in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with deadly intent. Every major council species had contributed their finest vessels, Draknari dreadnoughts with plasma cannons that could crack planets. Vorthak, mine ships crewed by the most powerful psychic warriors. Nexari precision cruisers, whose crystal hulls could cut through asteroids like butter. "Today we end this human nonsense once and for all," Korvac announced to his fleet commanders through the communication array. His dragon-like scales rippled with satisfaction as he surveyed the greatest military force ever assembled. These upstart mammals may have learned some clever tricks during their exile, but they cannot stand against the combined might of 7 civilized species. The target was New Terra, humanity's supposed capital world in the Outer Rim. Intelligence reports suggested it was lightly defended, with only a few orbital platforms and maybe a dozen ships. The humans had clearly grown overconfident after their little magic show in the council chambers. "All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump," Korvac ordered. "We'll drop right on top of them before they know what hit them. No warnings, no surrender. Demands. We crush them completely and show the galaxy what happens to species that challenge the natural order." The fleet jumped as one, disappearing into the swirling vortex of faster-than-light travel. For 3 hours they raced through hyperspace, while Korvac imagined the victory celebrations that would follow. The council would probably make him Supreme Admiral after this. Maybe they'd even name a star system after him when they dropped back into normal space. Korvac's first thought was that they had made a navigation error. New Terra hung before them exactly as the intelligence reports described, but something was wrong. The planet looked too peaceful, too calm for a world about to face annihilation. "All ships, battle stations," Korvac roared. "Charge weapons and prepare to fire on my command." That's when he discovered the problem. His weapons wouldn't charge. The massive plasma cannons that could melt through the cores of planets simply refused to power up. His tactical officer, a nervous young Draknari named Vextar, frantically worked his controls. "Sir, the weapon systems aren't responding. They're not damaged or offline. They just won't activate." Across the fleet, similar reports flooded the communication channels. Ship after ship reported the same impossible situation. Their weapons existed, their power systems were functional, but somehow the two refused to connect. Then things got stranger. Admiral Korvac watched in disbelief as his main plasma cannon began to change. The metal flowed like liquid, reshaping itself into something completely different. Where moments before had been a weapon of mass destruction, now sat a device his computer identified as a medical fabrication unit. "What in the void is happening?" he demanded. Throughout the fleet, the transformation continued. Missile launchers became atmospheric processors. Energy weapons turned into hydroponic systems. Every instrument of war was becoming a tool of creation and healing. A new voice filled every ship's communication system simultaneously. It was calm, friendly, and unmistakably human. "Welcome to New Terra, Admiral Korvac. This is Captain Park, Minsu of the Human Defense Corps. We've been expecting you." The Admiral's blood turned to ice. How did they know his name? How were they speaking to his entire fleet at once? Most importantly, how had they done the impossible? "We've prepared comfortable accommodations for your crews while we discuss the future," the human captain continued. "Please don't be alarmed by the transportation process." Before Korvac could ask what transportation process, his entire fleet began to glow with soft blue light. Admiral Korvac found himself standing in a corridor that shouldn't exist. One moment he had been on the bridge of his flagship, watching his weapons transform into gardening equipment. The next moment, he was here, in a place that made his brain hurt to look at. The walls seemed to be made of crystallized light, shifting between colors that had no names. The floor felt solid under his feet, but when he looked down, he could see stars moving beneath the surface. Everything was beautiful and impossible, and completely wrong according to every law of physics he knew. "Admiral, welcome aboard Sanctuary Station." Korvac spun around to face the human who had materialized behind him. Captain Park Min-soo looked young, maybe 30 years old by human standards, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He wore the same shimmering uniform that seemed to be standard for these returned humans. "Where is my fleet?" Korvac demanded, his scales flashing angry red. "What have you done to my crews?" "They're safe," Min-soo assured him, gesturing for the alien admiral to follow him down the impossible corridor. "All 5,000 ships, all 2.3 million crew members. Everyone is being housed comfortably while we sort this out. Would you like to see?" They walked to what Min-soo called an observation deck. The walls became transparent, revealing a view that made Korvac's breath catch in his throat. His entire armada sat peacefully in organized rows, each ship glowing with the same soft blue light. Through the transparent hulls, he could see his crews moving around normally, apparently unharmed, but clearly no longer in control of their vessels. "This is impossible," Korvac whispered. "No technology can transport entire fleets instantaneously. No force in the galaxy can disable our weapons without destroying them." Min-soo nodded sympathetically. "You're right. No technology can do what you've seen today." "Then how—" 300 years ago, Min-soo interrupted gently, "humanity encountered something in the void between galaxies. We call them the architects, though that's not really what they are. They're so old that they remember when this galaxy was young. To them, matter and energy are just suggestions, not laws." The human captain waved his hand, and the air around them filled with equations that seemed to write themselves in fire. Mathematical formulas that described the fundamental forces of reality in ways the Council's greatest scientists had never imagined. "They taught us that the universe operates on principles far deeper than what your species understand as physics. Your weapons didn't malfunction, Admiral. We simply asked them to become something more useful." Korvac stared at the impossible, equations floating in the air. His tactical mind, trained through decades of warfare, tried to process what he was seeing. "You're saying you can rewrite the laws of reality?" "Not rewrite," Min-soo corrected. "We learned to work with the real laws, the ones that exist beneath what you think you know. Your species mastered manipulation of matter and energy. We learned to understand the code that creates matter and energy in the first place." The human gestured again, and new terror appeared in the space between them, a perfect miniature world spinning slowly in the air. Korvac could see cities, oceans, even individual humans walking through parks. Every human world, every human ship, every human settlement operates on these deeper principles now. We don't need weapons because we can simply ask hostile objects to become helpful ones. We don't need shields because we can exist partially outside the dimensions where damage occurs. Korvac felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries, genuine fear. "What do you want from us?" Min-soo's smile became sad. "The same thing we wanted 300 years ago, Admiral. To coexist peacefully, to share knowledge and grow together, to prove that civilization doesn't have to be built on conquest and oppression." He looked out at the disabled fleet, his expression thoughtful. "Your people sent you here to destroy us because they're afraid of change. But change is the only constant in the universe. The question is whether your species will adapt and grow, or remain trapped in patterns that stopped working centuries ago." News traveled fast in the galaxy, even when governments tried to suppress it. Within hours of Admiral Korvac's fleet disappearing, whispers spread through trade routes, mining colonies, and slave worlds. The impossible had happened. The mighty Council Armada had been defeated without a single shot being fired. On the mining world of Kepler 442, a Vorthak overseer named Zekmal was having the worst day of his 300-year life. The purple-skinned alien had ruled this dusty rock for decades, using his psychic powers to keep the native population in line. The locals were a peaceful species called the Remnari, small furry creatures with large eyes who had never shown any signs of rebellion, until today. Zekmal was reviewing production reports when his office door simply opened. Not unlocked, not forced. It just opened as if the security system had politely decided to let someone in. Engineer Lee Somin walked through the doorway like she belonged there. She was a small human woman with calloused hands and intelligent eyes, wearing work clothes that somehow seemed more advanced than anything the council had ever produced. "Hey, excuse me," Zekmal snarled, his mental powers reaching out to crush this intruder's mind. "This is a restricted area. You will submit to neural conditioning immediately." He pushed harder with his psychic abilities, the same force that could reduce most beings to drooling servants. Instead, something incredible happened. The power that touched Lee Somin's mind transformed into something else entirely. Suddenly, Zekmal could feel everything the enslaved miners felt. Their exhaustion after 16-hour shifts, their hunger from meager rations, their despair at watching their children grow up in chains. The Vorthak overseer staggered backward, overwhelmed by emotions he had never bothered to consider. What did you do to me?" "Nothing," Lee Somin replied calmly. "I just helped you understand what empathy feels like. The beings you've been controlling are people, not tools. They have hopes and dreams and families just like you do." She gestured toward the window that looked out over the mining operation. "I'm here to inform you that Kepler 442 is now a free world. The Remnari people can choose their own government and decide their own future." Zekmal tried to activate the planetary defense systems, but his control panels displayed a message he'd never seen before. Unable to target peaceful beings. His weapons, his security forces, even his communication systems had simply stopped, responding to commands that involved harming others. Similar scenes played out across dozens of star systems over the following days. Humans appeared wherever oppression existed, not as conquerors, but as quiet revolutionaries. They didn't arrive in warships or make dramatic speeches. They simply showed up and offered choice where none had existed before. On the factory world of Nexus Prime, engineer Kim Do-hyun helped enslaved workers organize their first democratic election in 4 centuries. On the prison planet of Shadow's End, medic Yoon Ji-soo transformed the torture chambers into healing centers and gave the guards the same choice she gave everyone else: evolve or leave. The transformations weren't forced. Humans never threatened or coerced anyone. They just made it impossible for the old systems of oppression to function while offering something better to anyone ready to embrace it. The council species watched in horror as their carefully maintained order crumbled. Rebellion wasn't spreading through violence or propaganda. It was spreading through hope. Species that had accepted their place at the bottom of the hierarchy for centuries were suddenly remembering what freedom felt like, and there was nothing the council could do to stop it. Their weapons wouldn't fire on the human liberators. Their psychic powers wouldn't work on human minds. Their authority simply evaporated wherever humans appeared. The galaxy was waking up from a 300-year nightmare, and humanity was showing them that a better dream was possible. The Galactic Council chambers had never seen chaos like this. Emergency sessions were being called every hour, as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. Entire star systems were declaring independence. Trade routes were shutting down. The carefully maintained hierarchy that had ruled for centuries was collapsing faster than anyone thought possible. Prime Councillor Vexitar's scales had been flashing desperate orange for 3 days straight. His massive claws scraped against his speaking platform as he addressed the increasingly panicked assembly. "They're destroying everything we've built," he roared at the gathered representatives. "Our authority, our control, our entire way of life. We need immediate military action across all sectors." Commander Zeltar, the Vorthak who had once taught students about primitive humans, shook his purple head in defeat. "With what military? Half our fleets refuse to fire on human targets. The other half can't even locate them properly. Our psychic warriors report that human minds simply don't exist on any level they can reach." The Nexari trade representative Kexmar chimed in with his crystalline voice. "Economic projections show complete system collapse within months if this continues. 17 major mining operations have gone offline. The slave worlds that provided our raw materials are now demanding payment for their labor." "Payment?" Vexitar's scales flashed bright red. They should be grateful we allowed them to serve the greater galactic good. That's when the voice filled the chamber. The greater good? Captain Song Ariam materialized in the center of the room, her presence somehow calming the chaos around her. Unlike the other humans they'd encountered, she radiated an authority that made even the council representatives pause. Whose definition of good are we using, Counselor? The guards raised their weapons instinctively, then lowered them in confusion, as their targeting systems displayed the now familiar message, "Unable to acquire hostile target." Vextar's voice shook with rage. "You have no right to be here. This is a closed council session, a council that makes decisions affecting billions of beings who have no voice in your government," Ariam replied calmly. "That doesn't sound very democratic to me." The mystic ethereals, beings of pure energy who rarely spoke during council sessions, suddenly pulsed with curious light. Their telepathic voice reached every mind in the chamber. "Human entity, your species has achieved something that should be impossible. In mere centuries, you have transcended the limitations that have bound our galaxy for millennia." "How?" Ariam smiled, and for a moment her human form seemed to shimmer with the same energy. "As the ethereals, we learned the hardest lesson any species can learn, that survival isn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about being willing to change, to grow beyond what you were." She gestured, and the chamber filled with images that made every representative gasp. Worlds where different species worked together as equals, cities where Draknari children played alongside Remnari cubs, while Nexari mentors taught them both. Space stations where former enemies collaborated on projects that pushed the boundaries of what was possible. "This is the Free Worlds Alliance," Ariam explained. 47 star systems and growing. No rulers, no castes, no species ranked above others. Just beings working together because they choose to, not because they're forced to. The images showed technological marvels that surpassed anything the Council had achieved. Ships that could travel instantly between stars, healing devices that could cure any disease, terraforming equipment that could turn barren rocks into garden worlds in months instead of centuries. "But how?" Commander Zeltar whispered. "We've spent millennia developing our technologies. How are these primitive species suddenly creating wonders?" "Because," Ariam's voice carried infinite patience, "when you stop wasting energy on oppression and control, when you stop forcing brilliant minds to work in mines instead of laboratories, when you give every being the chance to contribute their unique gifts, miracles become routine." She looked directly at each council representative. "The old galaxy is ending whether you accept it or not. The question is whether you'll be part of building something better or become a footnote in history like the empires that came before you." The chamber fell silent, except for the soft humming of the ethereals, who seemed to be communicating among themselves at frequencies beyond normal perception. Finally, Vextar spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "What? What would this new galaxy look like?" Ariam smiled. "Like something worth building together." 6 months later, Ambassador Cho Yuna stood before a sight that would have been impossible to imagine just a year ago. The old council chambers had been transformed into something beautiful and alive. Gone were the harsh military angles and intimidating shadows. In their place flowed organic curves that seemed to breathe with their own inner light. Representatives from over 100 species filled the new galactic assembly. Tiny Remnari miners sat next to towering Draknari warriors. Crystalline Nexari shared data streams with glowing ethereals. Former slaves debated policy with their former masters as equals. The translation system, a gift from humanity, allowed every voice to be heard in perfect clarity. "Today marks the beginning of something our galaxy has never seen before," Yuna announced, her words reaching every being in their native language. "Not the rule of the strongest, but the cooperation of all. Not the dominance of a few, but the freedom of many." The changes had been remarkable and swift. The Draknari Empire, faced with universal rebellion and weapons that refused to function, had been the first major power to negotiate. Their proud warrior culture had found new purpose in exploration and protection of trade routes. Instead of conquering worlds, they now defended them from pirates and natural disasters. The Vorthak Collective had been harder to convince. Their entire society was built around psychic superiority, and admitting that other species deserved equal treatment challenged everything they believed. But when their telepathic abilities began transforming into empathic healing powers around humans, some began to see the possibilities. Commander Zeltar had become one of the first Vorthak to volunteer for humanity's consciousness expansion program. Not everyone adapted easily. The Krexari, a warrior species known for their aggression, struggled with concepts that required abandoning their violent nature. Some groups retreated to remote systems, unable to accept a galaxy where strength meant cooperation instead of conquest. But even they were slowly changing, as younger generations saw the wonders being achieved through peaceful collaboration. The real miracles were happening on worlds that had been written off as worthless. The mining planet Kepler 442, once a symbol of oppression, had become a center for geological research. The former slaves who had spent centuries digging in the dirt were now discovering new minerals that made faster-than-light travel safer and more efficient. Their intimate knowledge of planetary geology, previously dismissed as worthless, proved invaluable for terraforming projects. "We offer our knowledge freely to any who seek it," Yuna continued, gesturing toward the viewing screens that showed Humanity's Transcendence Academies. Beings from dozens of species sat in classes that challenged everything they thought they knew about reality. Some struggled with concepts that required abandoning their need for control. Others embraced the teachings eagerly, their minds opening to possibilities they had never imagined. The Lumina, a peaceful species that had been considered too weak to matter under the old system, were among the most gifted students. Their natural harmony with energy fields made them excellent at manipulating the fundamental forces of reality. Within months, they were teaching concepts that amazed even their human instructors. But the greatest changes were happening in space itself. The old military fleets had been transformed into exploration vessels. Instead of patrolling for rebellions, they now searched for new worlds to explore and new species to welcome into the growing alliance. Weapons factories had become research centers. Prison planets had become universities. The galaxy was expanding its horizons in ways that went far beyond simple exploration. Scientists from different species were combining their unique perspectives to understand the universe in revolutionary ways. Artists were creating beauty that transcended anything possible within the limitations of single-species cultures. Most remarkably, the galaxy was beginning to look beyond its own borders. Deep space telescopes, built with combined technologies that surpassed anything the Council had achieved, were detecting signs of intelligence in neighboring galaxies. The question was no longer whether they were alone, but whether they were ready to meet whatever was out there as a united civilization. Humanity had kept its promise in the most unexpected way possible. They had returned not as conquerors, but as teachers, proving that the greatest victory wasn't defeating your enemies, but helping them become something better than they ever dreamed possible.